Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cowboys and Cattle. In our last episode, we witnessed one of the most dramatic moments in Heartland history. After two false alarms that left Amy and Ty confused and anxious, Amy's water finally broke during Caleb and Cassandra's wedding reception. But Ty was trapped in a hospital an hour away, stuck under observation after collapsing from exhaustion. Amy made the bold decision to have their baby at home at Heartland rather than go to a hospital without Ty by her side, and Caleb left his own wedding to rescue his best friend. We left Amy in active labor with Dr. Margot progressing quickly at 5 centimeters, her eyes on the loft stairs, praying Ty would arrive in time. If you're enjoying this series, please hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss a chapter. Today's episode brings us Caleb's daring hospital rescue, Ty's desperate race home, and the beautiful moment when Lindy Marion Borden enters the world surrounded by love and family. Let's dive in. The hospital room was suffocating in its sterility. White walls, white sheets, the antiseptic smell that Ty had come to associate with illness and confinement. He lay in the narrow bed, staring at the acoustic tile ceiling, counting the tiny holes in each square for what felt like the 100th time. The monitors beside him beeped in steady rhythm, tracking a heart that was beating far too fast for someone supposedly resting. His mind was an hour away, in a loft above a barn, with a woman in labor who needed him. Amy was bringing their daughter into the world, and he was stuck here, trapped by bureaucracy and hospital policy and the consequences of his own body giving out at the worst possible moment. He'd tried everything. Reasoning with doctors, explaining the urgency, offering to sign any waiver that would release the hospital from liability. Nothing worked. The physician who'd admitted him wouldn't be back until morning rounds, and hospital policy was ironclad: patients under observation for unexplained collapse couldn't be discharged without doctor's clearance. His phone sat on the bedside table, a lifeline and a torment. Lou had called 20 minutes ago with an update that had sent his anxiety spiraling. Amy was at 5 centimeters, progressing faster than expected. Dr. Margot said the baby could come within hours, maybe less. First babies were unpredictable, but Amy's body seemed determined to move quickly. Ty felt panic clawing at his chest, making it hard to breathe. He was going to miss it. After everything they'd been through, the false alarms, the waiting, the fear, he was going to miss the birth of his daughter because of a policy designed to protect the hospital, not the patient. The door opened. A nurse entered, or at least someone dressed as a nurse. Pale blue scrubs that looked slightly too large, a surgical mask covering the lower half of the face, a hospital badge clipped somewhat haphazardly to the pocket. The figure carried a clipboard and moved with a confidence that didn't quite match the awkward swagger in the walk. Ty watched as the nurse glanced around the room with exaggerated casualness, checked the heart monitor with no real interest, then looked directly at him. Their eyes met, and something flickered in Ty's memory. Something familiar about those eyes, that particular shade of blue-green. The nurse spoke, voice slightly muffled by the mask, but attempting professional detachment. "Mr. Borden, we need to take you for another scan." The voice was wrong, too casual, the pitch forced into a lower register that didn't quite land. And was that? Ty squinted in the dim light. Was that a tuxedo collar visible under the scrub shirt? Recognition dawned like sunrise, slow and then all at once.
Caleb.
The nurse pulled down the surgical mask, revealing Caleb's face split by a mischievous grin that was equal parts triumph and desperation.
Borrowed these from a laundry cart. Surety here is terrible. Hulver, your wife's having a baby. We're leaving.
The audacity of it hit Ty all at once. His best friend, who should be at his own wedding reception, dressed in stolen scrubs over formal wear, standing in a hospital room proposing they just walk out. The absurdity mixed with profound gratitude created a cocktail of emotions that made Ty's eyes burn with unshed tears. Caleb pulled a bag from under the oversized scrubs, Ty's street clothes, retrieved from his truck in the parking lot. The planning that had gone into this ridiculous, beautiful rescue mission was evident in every detail.
Get dressed. Fast. We don't have much time.
Ty didn't hesitate. Questions could come later. Right now, his wife needed him, and Caleb had provided a way. He ripped off the hospital gown and dressed with shaking hands, adrenaline overriding the exhaustion that had landed him here in the first place. Jeans, shirt, jacket, each piece of clothing felt like armor, like transformation from patient back to person, from trapped to free. Caleb laid out the plan in hushed, urgent tones. They would walk out like they belonged there, like this was routine patient transport. The hospital was in the middle of shift change, chaos that would provide cover. If anyone stopped them, Caleb would handle it. The key was confidence, acting like this was completely normal. They stepped into the corridor, and Ty's heart hammered so hard he was certain everyone could hear it. The hallway bustled with activity nurses comparing charts, orderlies pushing equipment, visitors looking lost and uncertain. Caleb kept one hand on Ty's arm, guiding him like a legitimate medical professional, the clipboard held prominently in his other hand like a shield of authority. A nurse glanced their way, her expression shifting from neutral to curious. "Where are you taking that patient?" Caleb didn't even break stride, his voice smooth with practiced lies.
Radiology, emergency scan ordered by the doctor. You know how backed up they get during shift change?
The explanation was just plausible enough, delivered with enough confidence that the nurse nodded and turned away, already distracted by a call light flashing down the hall. They kept moving, each step taking them closer to freedom, further from the room that had held Ty prisoner. Past the nurse's station where multiple staff members worked on computers, none of them looking up. Past the elevator banks where families waited with worried faces. Through a door marked staff only that Caleb had apparently scouted earlier, his reconnaissance was thorough despite the time constraints. Down a back stairwell that smelled of concrete and industrial cleaner, their footsteps echoing in the enclosed space. And then outside, cool evening air hit Ty's face, tasted like freedom and possibility and hope. The parking lot stretched before them, fluorescent lights casting orange pools on the asphalt.
Run!
They sprinted to Caleb's truck, both of them grinning despite the seriousness, the absurdity of the escape making it feel like something out of a movie. Caleb started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot at a deliberately normal pace, nothing to draw attention or make anyone look twice at the truck leaving hospital grounds. Once they hit the main road, Caleb pressed the accelerator to the floor. The truck surged forward, eating up highway, carrying Ty home to the moment that mattered more than anything else in his life. The silence between them was comfortable, years of friendship making words unnecessary. But Ty felt the weight of what Caleb had done settling over him. The risk, the sacrifice, the absolute loyalty it took to leave your own wedding reception to break your best friend out of a hospital.
You're supposed to be married right now, dancing with your wife.
I am married. Already happened. The dancing can wait. This can't.
The simple logic of it, the clear priority Caleb had assigned to this moment, made Ty's throat tight with emotion. This was family. Not blood, but choice. The people who showed up when everything was falling apart, who took risks without being asked, who understood that some moments couldn't be missed. Ty pulled out his phone and called Lou, his hands shaking slightly as he pressed her contact.
T, please tell me you're on your way.
40 minutes out? How is she?
7 centimeters and moving fast, doctor. Margot says it could be soon, really soon.
The words sent fresh panic through Ty's system. 7 centimeters meant transition was approaching, meant the baby could come within the hour. 40 minutes suddenly felt like an eternity.
Tell her I'm coming. Tell her to wait for me.
Just hurry, she needs you.
He hung up and stared out at the dark highway stretching endlessly ahead, each mile marker a reminder of the distance still between him and Amy. The truck's speedometer climbed higher, Caleb pushing the limits of safety but not recklessness, both of them acutely aware that an accident would mean missing everything. The landscape blurred past small towns sleeping in darkness, farmland stretching empty under stars, the occasional pair of headlights passing in the opposite direction. Ty's mind created a dozen worst-case scenarios. What if there were complications? What if Amy needed him and he wasn't there? What if their daughter was born while he was still on this highway, still racing toward a moment that had already passed? Caleb seemed to sense the spiral of anxiety, his voice cutting through the darkness with calm certainty.
We're going to make it. I promise you.
And somehow, the promise from someone who'd just broken him out of a hospital while wearing stolen scrubs felt completely believable. In the loft, Amy existed in a world that had narrowed to the space between contractions. The room that had been her home, the place where she and Ty had built their married life, had transformed into something primal and ancient, a birthing chamber, where generations of women had done this same work. Lou sat beside her, holding her hand through each wave of pain that crashed over her body. Between contractions, Amy watched the stairs with desperate hope, willing Ty to appear, needing his presence like she'd never needed anything before. Dr. Margot moved around the room with practiced efficiency, checking vitals, monitoring progress, her calm demeanor the only steady thing in a world that felt like it was tilting on its axis. The midwife had delivered hundreds of babies in homes just like this, had seen every variation of birth that existed, and her confidence was the anchor keeping Amy from complete panic. Another contraction built, a tsunami of pressure and pain that took over Amy's entire body. She gripped Lou's hand so tightly she thought bones might break, breathing through the peak with sounds she didn't recognize as coming from herself, low, animal, instinctive. When it passed, she found her voice.
Where is he? Lou, where is Ty?
Coming. Caleb texted 15 minutes ago. They're close.
15 minutes felt like hours, felt like days. Amy's body was moving faster than she'd expected, faster than the books and classes had prepared her for. Each contraction brought the baby lower, brought the moment closer whether Ty was here or not. Dr. Margot examined her again, and the midwife's expression shifted into something more serious, more urgent. Dr. Margot, Amy, you're at 9 centimeters. When you hit 10, we need to start pushing. Your body's working fast. The words sent fresh determination through Amy's exhausted system. She couldn't push yet. She had to wait. She had to give Ty time to get here, because doing this without him felt impossible, felt wrong in a way that went beyond preference into something fundamental about who they were as a couple. But her body had its own agenda, following rhythms older than thought or desire. The pressure built with each contraction, her body preparing whether her mind was ready or not. Downstairs in the barn, the waiting family created a tableau of anxiety and hope. Jack paced the barn aisle in a pattern he'd probably walked 1,000 times over his decades at Heartland, his boots wearing a familiar track in the dirt floor. The weathered lines on his face seemed deeper tonight, carved by worry and memories of another birth that had ended in tragedy. Tim stood near the barn entrance, uncharacteristically silent, his usual bravado stripped away by the weight of this moment. He and Jack didn't speak, but their shared anxiety created a bond that transcended their complicated history. Georgie had arrived from her jumping clinic, still in her riding clothes, her young face tight with concern for Amy. She sat on a hay bale, hands clasped, looking like she was praying even though she'd never been particularly religious. Above them, muffled through the loft floor, they could hear Amy's cries during contractions. Each sound made Jack flinch, made Tim look away, made Georgie squeeze her eyes shut. The waiting was agony, made worse by their helplessness, by the fact that there was nothing any of them could do except stand vigil and hope. Caleb's truck roared up Heartland's driveway, at 9:10, gravel spraying as he braked hard. Ty was moving before the vehicle fully stopped, his door flying open, his feet hitting the ground at a run. The barn had never seemed so far away. His legs carried him across the yard, up the stairs that he'd climbed thousands of times but never with this desperate urgency. He took them 2 at a time, his breath coming in gasps, his entire focus on the door at the top. He burst through it like a man breaking the surface after too long underwater.
Amy!
She was propped up in their bed, her hair damp with sweat, her face flushed with exertion, her eyes finding his with such relief and love that Ty felt his chest crack open. He crossed to her in 3 strides, dropping to his knees beside the bed, taking her hand in both of his. The apologies tumbled out for not being there sooner, for collapsing, for all the ways his body had betrayed him at the worst possible moment. But Amy shook her head, cutting through his guilt with simple truth.
You're here now. That's everything.
Dr. Margot looked up from her preparations, her smile warm with approval. Dr. Margot, perfect timing, Dad. She's fully dilated. We're about to meet your daughter. Lou slipped out quietly, giving them this moment of privacy before the storm of birth overtook everything else. She descended the stairs to find the family gathered in tense silence, their faces turning toward her with identical expressions of hope and fear.
T made it. They're starting.
The collective exhale from the group was audible, tension breaking like a dam. Jack's shoulders sagged with relief. Tim wiped his eyes roughly. Georgie let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Now the real waiting began. The final wait before everything changed forever. In the loft, time became elastic and strange. Contractions came in waves that seemed both endless and instantaneous, each one building on the last, demanding everything Amy had and then asking for more. Dr. Margot coached her through the pushing with calm, steady instructions, but it was Ty's presence that gave Amy the strength to keep going. He was her anchor in the storm, One arm supported her shoulders, helping her curl forward with each push. The other hand was wrapped in hers, giving her something solid to grip when the pain threatened to overwhelm everything else. His voice in her ear whispered encouragement that cut through the fog of exhaustion and pain. The room fell away until there was only this: the work, the effort, the single-minded focus on bringing their daughter into the world. Amy pushed until she thought she couldn't anymore, until her body screamed for rest, until the effort consumed everything she had. And then Ty's voice broke through, filled with wonder and disbelief.
I can see her. Amy, I can see her head.
The words gave her a second wind, pulling strength from reserves she didn't know existed. Margot's encouragement layered over Ty's voice, creating a chorus that carried Amy forward through the final, hardest moments. Dr. Margot, one more push, Amy. One more, and she's here. Amy gathered everything, every ounce of love she felt for this baby she hadn't met, every bit of strength she'd inherited from Marion and built through years of working with horses, every promise she'd made to herself about being a mother. She channeled it all into one final massive effort. The pressure peaked, then released, and suddenly the loft filled with a new sound: a baby's cry, strong and indignant and absolutely perfect. Dr. Margot, it's a girl! Time stopped. The world stopped. Everything narrowed to the tiny person Dr. Margot lifted, still connected by the umbilical cord, still covered in vernix and blood and the evidence of birth. The midwife placed the baby directly on Amy's chest, skin to skin, and reality snapped back into sharp focus. She was real. After 9 months of waiting, of wondering, of imagining, their daughter was real and here and perfect in ways that made Amy's heart feel too large for her chest. The baby's face was scrunched in outrage at being forced from the warm darkness into bright light and cold air. Her tiny fists waved in protest, her legs kicked, her whole body radiating fury at the transition. Dark hair stuck to her head in damp curls, and her eyes, when they opened briefly, were the dark blue of all newborns, searching for something familiar in an alien world.
Lindy. Hi, Lindy. We've been waiting for you.
Ty was crying openly, tears streaming down his face as he touched his daughter's head with trembling fingers. His expression cycled through shock and wonder and overwhelming love, emotions too big to contain, too profound to articulate.
She's perfect. She's so perfect.
Dr. Margot worked efficiently around them, delivering the placenta, checking Amy's vitals, making sure both mother and baby were healthy and stable. Her movements were practiced and sure, giving Amy and Ty space to bond with their daughter while ensuring everything medical was handled properly. After the immediate necessities were complete, after Lindy was cleaned and weighed and wrapped in a soft blanket that Lou had embroidered with tiny horses, Dr. Margot opened the loft door. Her voice carried down to the barn below where the family waited in breathless anticipation. Dr. Margot, you can come up now. Someone wants to meet her family. The sound of footsteps on the stairs was hesitant at first, then eager. Lou appeared first, already crying before she'd fully entered the room. Jack followed, moving slowly, his weathered face carved with emotion that made him look both ancient and ageless. Georgie and Tim came next, and finally Caleb, still wearing his tuxedo pants with the borrowed scrubs bunched in his hand like a trophy. They crowded into the loft carefully, reverently, as if entering sacred space, which in a way they were. This room had witnessed the beginning of Amy and Ty's marriage, and now it held the newest member of the Borden family. Lou reached them first, her hands covering her mouth as fresh tears spilled over.
Amy, she's beautiful. You did it. You actually did it.
The awe in her sister's voice made Amy smile through her own exhaustion. She had done it. With Ty beside her, with Dr. Margot's skill, with family waiting below, she'd brought Lindy safely into the world. Caleb approached next, his usual cocky grin softened into something gentle.
Congratulations, you two. Worth leaving my wedding for.
Ty looked at his best friend, this person who'd broken him out of a hospital and driven like a maniac and made this moment possible, and couldn't find words adequate to express his gratitude.
Thank you for everything. I owe you.
You don't owe me anything. That's what family does.
They passed Lindy around carefully, each person getting their moment to hold her, to marvel at her tiny fingers and perfect little nose. Georgie cradled her with surprising confidence, whispering promises about teaching her to ride. Tim held her with the careful awkwardness of a man unused to babies, his gruff exterior cracking completely. But when Amy placed Lindy in Jack's arms, the room fell into reverent silence. Everyone watched as the patriarch of the family, the man who'd built Heartland with his own hands, who'd raised 2 daughters and helped raise 2 granddaughters, held his great-granddaughter for the first time. Jack stood perfectly still, looking down at the baby with an expression of such profound emotion that it was almost painful to witness. Tears tracked slowly down his weathered face, decades of loss and love and hope culminating in this single moment. His voice when he spoke was rough with emotion, thick with memories of his wife and daughter who should have been here to see this.
She looks just like Marion did when she was born. The same nose, the same serious expression, like she's already trying to figure everything out.
He touched Lindy's cheek with one calloused finger, the gesture infinitely gentle.
You named her after my Lindy, after my wife. That means more to me than I can say.
Amy felt fresh tears, these ones born of love and legacy and the weight of generations. This was what Marion had hoped for when she'd placed Amy's stone in the garden all those years ago. This was what Jack and Lindy had started when they built Heartland from nothing. This was the continuation of everything that mattered. Jack looked down at Lindy, his great-granddaughter, the newest link in a chain that stretched back through time and would extend forward into an unknowable future. When he spoke again, his voice was steady with love and welcome and promise.
Welcome to the family, Lindy Marion Borden.
The words settled over the loft like a blessing. Welcome. Family. Home. This was where Lindy belonged, surrounded by people who would love her, teach her, help her grow into whoever she was meant to be. Amy and Ty exchanged glances, both overwhelmed by the perfection of this moment. After the false alarms and the panic, after the hospital and the desperate race home, after hours of labor and the final intense push, this was what it had all been for. This tiny person, already deeply loved, already woven into the fabric of Heartland's story. The family stayed for another hour, taking turns holding Lindy, marveling at her, already planning her future. But eventually they drifted away, giving Amy and Ty privacy for their first night as parents. Caleb left to return to his wedding reception, his ridiculous rescue mission complete. Lou and Georgie walked back to the house together, already discussing baby shower plans. Tim shook Ty's hand and kissed Amy's forehead before heading to his truck, and Jack lingered longest, sitting in the rocking chair and watching his family with satisfaction that went soul deep. Finally, as midnight approached, Amy and Ty were alone with their daughter. Lindy had fallen asleep, her tiny face peaceful, her breathing soft and even. They lay on either side of her, both too wired to sleep despite their exhaustion, just watching her exist.
We made her. We actually made a whole person.
She's ours. For always.
The enormity of it was still sinking in the responsibility, the love, the way their lives had changed irrevocably in the span of a few hours. But underneath the fear and uncertainty was joy so profound it felt like sunlight breaking through clouds after a storm. They'd done it. Against all odds, despite every obstacle, they'd brought Lindy home to Heartland. And tomorrow, they'd figure out how to be parents. But tonight, they just watched their daughter sleep and felt grateful beyond measure for this perfect, impossible gift. That concludes today's episode of Heartland and our special 2-part birth story. What started as crisis and separation ended in triumph and welcome. Caleb's outrageous rescue mission breaking Ty out of a hospital in stolen scrubs showed the lengths people will go to for family. The desperate 40-minute race home, with every mile marker a reminder of what Ty stood to lose, captured the urgency of parenthood beginning. Amy's strength in labor, pushing through exhaustion and pain while waiting for Ty, demonstrated the incredible power of the human body and spirit. And Ty's arrival just in time, bursting through that loft door to be exactly where he needed to be, was perfect in its timing and emotion. The birth itself, surrounded by the familiar walls of the loft where their marriage began, brought everything full circle. And Jack's emotional welcome seeing Marion in Lindy's features, honoring his late wife in her name-connected past, present, and future in one beautiful moment. Lindy Marion Borden, born at Heartland Ranch, welcomed into a family that will teach her about horses and strength and choosing to be better. This is how legacies continue. This is how love multiplies across generations. If you enjoyed this 2-part series, please like and subscribe, and tell us in the comments what was your favorite moment. Until next time, this is Cowboys and Cattle.